As many of you know me, I've been the industry leader for the Exploring Technology module for the DMC class. So spent some time around Hyper, and apparently I couldn't stay away for more than 4 weeks, and now I'm back here again. But you know, the beginning of my career, the peak of my career was actually when I was 8 years old. And I was the child, one of the children in Kristina from Duvemåla. So I've actually met Björn once before when I was 8 years old. But I'm here to give you some more inspiration around how we can actually live together, how we can co-create a city together. And I'm going to do this by first kind of sharing my own passion. And then I'm going to dive into a couple of case studies for you to see what's being done in other places in the world. So the first place, so imagine you travel across the world and you are traveling out into the middle of nowhere and you're in this car and you're driving and it's empty in every direction and you're just going to the middle of nowhere, and out there in nothingness you meet a fence. There is a gate to a city, and there are guards there, and they stop your car and they open the door and they pull you out of the car and they give you a hug and they say, welcome home. Welcome home to this city. This is Black Rock City, where the co-created festival Burning Man takes place. So Burning Man is a co-created or a participatory festival where all the content is created by the participants themselves. So everything you see here is created by the people who go there on their own initiative. And it started 30 years ago with 300 people on a beach, and one guy built a sculpture of a man and set it on fire. They did it again next year. More people brought art and played music and did things. And you know, by the third year, it was known as Burning Man because that's what everyone remembered. And today, 70,000 people every year gather in the middle of the northern Nevada desert to build a city together. And there are tens of thousands of art pieces. There are nightclubs that can take 2,000 people. There are workshop rooms where you can learn about quantum physics, about Bitcoin, or about BDSM, whatever piques your fancy. And there are restaurants and bars where you go up and say, hey, can I have a beer? And someone will serve you a beer, not because you can buy or sell it, but because it's a gift. So the key here is that everything is created. The organizers basically say, hey, build a city here. And then people from all across the world come and build it together. A temple. Björn just talked about co-creating religion, right? I mean, if anything, this is the #1 co-created religion of the world. I mean, what other example can you mention of people like traveling into the desert and setting a sculpture on fire and you wouldn't call it religion? Now, the difference is that we're creating it, we're building it ourselves. This temple becomes a holy place that we create, where people create their own altars. We write on the walls messages to ourselves, messages to people who passed away, or to someone that we miss. And when we all gather to set the temple on fire, it is our holiness, it is our God that we celebrate. We celebrate the human ability to create that which we can find holy. And the people who come there today are from all across the world. Some of the world's foremost thinkers, philosophers, entrepreneurs, politicians, artists. You know how Google, they make doodles, they call it. It's when they change the logo on their first page. The first time Google changed their logo was this. This is from '96. This is, of course, the Burning Man symbol. This was on the front page of Google. And when you clicked it, it said, everyone at Google is at Burning Man. If the site goes down, we're not back till Tuesday. And Burning Man is built upon principles, values, some core ideas that we can all unify around. The first being gifting. So you're not allowed to buy or sell or trade or market at Burning Man. You're only allowed to give. So when you get that beer, it's not because it's free, because you managed to get someone to sponsor it. It's someone, an individual, who bought a beer, lugged it out into the desert, built a bar only to stand there for the pleasure of being able to say, "You're welcome." Like, you are asked to figure out what do you enjoy to give to other people, and then come there to give as much as possible of just that. Radical self-reliance. You are responsible to take care of yourself. In this mental place, no one is responsible for you except yourself. That means you carry the water you need. That means you carry the protection in case of a dust storm. That means you bring your own food and shelter. You can't depend on anyone else to solve your problems. You're responsible for yourself, physically and emotionally. Right? There's a nightclub that is built like a coliseum, like a giant jungle gym where you can climb 3 stories high, and there are ladders that go out over the audience with chains hanging in the ladders, and you can climb out there and you can hang 5 meters on top of an audience, and there are no guards that tell you you can't do this. There's no safety net that tells you where to go or where to not go. And yet, we still have less accidents than any other festival of similar size. By just telling people to take some fucking responsibility. It's weird, right? Or we clean up after ourselves. Hey, let's try that one at Way Out West or whatever next year. Like, hey guys, this year we're gonna clean up after ourselves. We can't even do that for our own events here at Hyperisland. So what are the keys that enables this to happen? Because for all we know, when it comes to building a city, to building things together, this shouldn't really work. And I believe there are some parts to that. And the most important part is the topic we're here for. It's about co-creation. Because what happens in the act of co-creation, what happens in the act of creation, is that we create ownership. When I feel that I am an integral part of creating something, then what comes out is mine. Suddenly I'm at my own home. I'm not a guest at some anonymous place, but I've created this place for myself. And suddenly I can see a connection from this object to myself. But it also is about values. Because I think that to build unified communities, you have to start looking at what are our actual shared values. And that's one of the challenges. We're going to build a city. You're going to build a block of people living together. What, you're going to have a personality test before you can move in there to check, like, what are your values? What do you believe in? So Burning Man has 10 principles, 10 values. Radical inclusion, everyone is always welcome. gifting, decommodification, that this is not a place for marketing or trying to sell. Because in this interaction, when I'm trying to sell something to you, I'm not me. The very transactional nature of our society becomes a barrier that prevents us from authentically meeting. Because I have this ulterior motive of achieving this, this sale, this transaction. And this is a request to not let interactions be replaced by transactions. Radical self-reliance, radical self-expression, to express yourself and to give that away. Oh, yeah. Communal effort to do things together, civic responsibility, leaving no trace, participation and immediacy, being in the moment. So, this city, built on shared values and built on the idea that anyone can do whatever they want on their own initiative. And that's the key to co-creation, right? Because it's not, I'm asking you what you do and what you want, and then I do it. That's feedback. It's not, oh, you have 3 choices, you can affect the outcome. That's interaction or interactivity. What we're looking for is co-creation, which means that I'm shifting the initiative for creation to you. I have an idea, and there's a clear path and a clear process for me to actually step forward and realize that idea on my own initiative. So, going back to another city, right? Stockholm is, it's called the loneliest city in the world. 60% or 58% live in single households. Kungsholmen is known as the loneliest island in the world. There's no spot that has that high concentration of single people in the world. Right? And it's easy to forget, but Sweden is the most individualist country in the world. If you look at the world value studies, which is done by the UN, that surveys what we value in the world, it turns out that Sweden is in the top corner of the most secular and the most individualist, the most self-centered or self-expressive. For example, on the question, it is important to take care of my parents, Sweden rates lowest in the world. That's a government problem, right? So this is quite a challenge. There's more to oh yeah, the laws and how we built the city kind of prevents co-living. But we have values that we have to nudge. We have values that we have to work with to be able to do this transition, to be able to live closer together. Because I think that if we could live more closer together, more authentically together, then that is the engine that builds trust in society. That is the engine that builds stability, safety, and inclusion. We're one of the most connected cities in the world, right? Everyone is online. That means that this is actually very fertile ground for doing experiments. In fact, a lot of Silicon Valley startups try Stockholm as their first market. Because you can try it out here first because everyone speaks English, so you don't have to translate. And it's still kind of a split off safe bubble where you can experiment before you go to the rest of the world. So we have this opportunity of using this digitalization to build trust. Now, do we do that? This was installed in my building, my old building where I lived. This is a booking system for the laundry machine. We used to have this you wrote on a piece of paper what time you had, and then you can and it worked. It always worked for me. But then there was complaints about this being unsafe, and the landowner installed this system so that now you used your little tag to book a time, and when your time was up, when it was not your time, the door would be locked, which meant if you're 5 minutes late to pick up your laundry, it's locked in, and and you can't. There's just no way of getting to it. Someone else who has the time after you shows up and opens the door for you. And if it's too late at night, then it's permanently locked. You have to wait till next morning. And this is because of what? Because we're basically saying that you can't even trust your neighbor to not steal your laundry. Like, that's at the level we're at in trust. And we have a landlord telling us that you can't trust each other. You're building a system that is not building trust, rather allows us to not have to trust each other. So I want to do some case studies. Who here knows about the castle, Slottet in Stockholm? Brilliant. So I'm going to do, so they are a co-created co-working space. And I just wanted to, the next couple of minutes, I'm just going to drop some this is ideas, these are inspirations. So if you have a notepad, feel free to kind of write them down. So one thing that the castle do is that they see themselves as a social platform, not just a co-working space, which means that they let their members organize events and use their resources as long as it's open for all members, right? So as long as all the members are invited to your event, you can use their venue for free. You can even get coffee from them. You can even get fika from them, right? That means that they today have 30 events per month. Everything from yoga to hackathons to seminars and meditation sessions. So 30 co-created events per month on the initiative of their members. They have a buddy system. So when you first become a member, you are asked hey, would you like to have a mentor? Would you like to have a buddy? And then they assign someone who's already lived there or been there to connect with you. And they use their members as employees. So they shift over responsibilities to their members. But not only that, they have, for example, they have an event pool, which is, if you have an event location, often you're going to need people who help out for events. So anyone who's a member of their co-working space can say, hey, I want to work 3 hours for this event, and then earn an extra income. Because if you have 200 people who run their own businesses, a certain percentage of them will need some extra money and appreciate the opportunity to do work in the building they're already working in. So out of four out of 5 permanent employees are previous members that went over, started working for them. And out of 12 people who work paid per hour, all 12 are also paying members running their own businesses in the building. So, what if we could think the same way about the fundamental things that needs to be done in a neighborhood, right? So that we could employ each other, or we could have structures that could support each other in taking these initiatives to make the neighborhood better. Take another example, Tech Farm. Tech Farm is a network of co-living spaces here in Stockholm, Hus 24, K9, and Tech Farm, which is the latest project, which is a new building being built for co-living. They have some principles when they're designing their co-living spaces. One is they're looking at spaces for different moods. So for example, they have an introvert space, they have an extrovert space, right? Because where are you right now? And they have rooms that are meant for the time you need to be alone, the time that you need to be on the phone, the time you need to be social, right? They're actually very focused or exclusive. they think very carefully about who they invite to move in there and have a strict application process that's both centralized by a few people who pick, but also the whole community gets to have an opinion of who gets to move into the building. And with self-development. So they encourage people there to have classes in meditation, in personal development, in social skills. Or take Open Door. Open Door is a network of co-living spaces in San Francisco and Portland. So they own a number of buildings where between 10 and 20 people live in their co-living spaces. One interesting thing they do is they build on existing networks. So they often have founders in their houses. So the first person who steps into their house is actually the person who sets the values and the principles and the ideas of that building. And once they find a new property, they give the opportunity to people who live in their other properties to become a founder by taking some of their friends and move into a new building and then be able to start that. So, and you know, most of you who've been in kind of co-living spaces, that's how they're created. They're created through social networks, right? So they basically built a business model around trusting the network of people to found new buildings. They provide digital tools to split costs, that is so that you can do cost splitting that is then integrated into your rent. But most importantly, they do co-living coaching. So they actually teach conflict resolution and how to live together to all the people who move into their houses. Because conflicts within a co-living space is one of the most costly and annoying things that can happen, right? And a lot of it can be solved if you just have the mental and emotional tools to do it. A sister organization to Open Door is Embassy Network. They actually spawn in different cities. So there are embassy co-living spaces in San Francisco, in New York, in Berlin, in Greece, and Costa Rica. And when you are a member at one, you're allowed to stay at the guest room of another. So this is especially tailored for the digital nomads that want to travel the world and have a home. And this is of course, some of you might have been here. This is taken at Norden in Sickla, which is a co-created social space, or what's known as a third space. If your home is the first space, your work is the second space. The third space is that extra space where you don't have the burdens of your work, and you don't have what often can be the burdens of your house, your home. So this is a co-created cultural space where we host events, where there are courses, where there are art being made, and it's built upon similar principles as Burning Man, co-created. The initiative lies with every person that walks through the door. It's self-managed. It uses self-management techniques to be able to let the community take decisions together of how to change the space and how to develop the space. It's decommodified. It's again taking out that financial equation out of a space, saying that you're here to give. And that also changes the social interaction. So these three have, of course, or these 5 cases have, of course, the commonality that all 5 of the projects I just mentioned are founded by people who's been to Burning Man. I guess my network is kind of biased of who I know and what ideas I think about. But This is just like a small toolkit of ideas, of things that is already happening, of how could you build together that I wanted to share. Because you're addressing this, right? And it's easy to look at buildings from this visual perspective. This is how we know to look at buildings. Because it's very easy to illustrate a building with a photo or a 3D rendering that looks really cool. Oh, we're going to build this thing. It's really hard to illustrate how it feels to hang out with people in a building, right? It's really hard to illustrate the actual social value that happens in this building. Take this room, for example. How fun does this building look from the outside? Really? So, yeah? Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, I guess the tower is kind of cool. And like, but that tendency, our visual mind is drawn to pictures. And that means that we tend to overestimate the importance of architecture, of visual design. So kind of giving you my 4 last advice here, and that is you can only plan for things you already know how to do. And this is hard, right? The second is to embrace impermanence. You're not going to come up with solutions. So anything you come up with has to have an end or have a thought of, well, how do we change it afterwards? Who first, then what? This is a Jim Collins quote saying that, or example, Valve, the computer game company, they have in their manual for employees, it says, as you probably found out by now, you were not hired to fill a specific job description. You were hired to constantly be looking around for the most valuable work you could be doing. So what they're saying that if we put together the right people, then they will know what to do. They will know what their job is, what their roles are. And then the most important thing, and that is that the story of a building is not about the blueprint. It's not about the spaces, but it's rather about social organization. So, how do we create spaces? How do we create social settings where we can be vulnerable? How can we create neighborhoods, societies where we can trust others? And this is my definition of trust. To trust other people more than they deserve. Right? Because if I trust you just as much as I believe that you deserve, that's not trust. That's calculated risk. Trust is when I'm actually a little bit uncomfortable and I don't know if you're going to deliver. I don't know if you want what's good for me. And I choose to trust you anyway. It's like taking that step over that little uncomfortable thing that's going on in your stomach. So how do we build a society that continuously encourages to trust others more than they deserve? Because that action, when I choose to trust you, although I'm unsure about the outcome, that is the only action that actually builds trust. Because it's in that action, I put a little bit of a larger jacket on you so that you get the opportunity to grow into that in my eyes. It's the only way we build trust in teams, in organizations, and in societies. So that was what I wanted to share. Thank you. I'm super excited about this project. I wish you so much luck. I won't be here, but feel free to call me, or text me, or write me on Facebook if you want advice or support or my help. I'll see you here on Friday again when your project is over. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Gustav. Thank you. will you be here at the presentations on Friday even? Awesome, great. So you might get some feedback from Gustav's perspective as well, if you're lucky. Okay, so what happens now? I'm a little bit unsure actually. So it's 11 o'clock-ish. I think there will be lunch soon. But I just wanted to check, is there anyone else from Alm that would like to say something before we leave this room? No? Just going to check quickly outside with the people that are here. Hello? Hey. Nina, is it time for lunch? So what do we do now? Okay, we have, cool. So then we'll tell the students that they can lunch at 12. Half an hour. Okay, so it's... Okay, cool. Thank you. Great. Hey. So at 11:37 there is lunch. So what your task is now is to go out, start team building, set up your team space wherever you want, and wait for lunch. That's going to be served out here at 11:37. Good luck and have fun.